am Anna Seawald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, the secret language of the body. Regulate your nervous system, heal your body, free your mind. I am speaking with authors Mann and Kardin Rabin. Before I tell you a little bit about the authors and what this episode is about, I want to say a few words about our live event, which took place on October 5th, a few days ago. And my heart is full of joy, gratitude, and love. We successfully wrapped up another live event this year. Yes, our second one, and it was simply fabulous. The art of communication in relationships, navigating needs, feelings, and deeper connection with the incredible Vet Erasmus. The outpouring of heartfelt messages about how phenomenal this event was is overwhelming. If you are getting my newsletter or if you are in my Facebook group, the Authentic Parenting Community, you can see some pictures and some notes that I shared with my audience. And if you are not receiving my newsletter, you can sign up on my website. And of course, you're always welcome to join the Authentic Parenting Community on Facebook, a free support group for the listeners of this show. This live podcast event has become my signature event, and we have truly built an amazing small community around it. We have had so many returning folks who came to all of my events. It's just wonderful. I hope I can meet you next time at our future events. As a longtime listener of this podcast, you've probably heard many times one message loud and clear that when a person is burdened by stress, anxiety, and trauma, their nervous system adapts to help keep them alive in the short term, but can trap them in survival mode long term, with detrimental, widespread consequences. They can become anxious, burnt out, tired, angry, and shut down, and prone to overthinking, disassociating, procrastinating, people-pleasing, physical pain, and chronic unexplained symptoms. This is the state of nervous system dysregulation. So today, mind-body practitioners Jennifer Mann, who is a returning guest, and her colleague and co-author Kardin Rabin discuss how we can gain nervous system regulation, help our children to co-regulate, redesign and rewire unhelpful responses to transform your health and life, and so much more. It's a fascinating, fantastic episode packed with practical tools. Of course, in the course of 9 years of this podcast, we have covered the topic of nervous system regulation numerous times on the show, and I will have links to Jenn's first episode and another fantastic episode, a favorite of yours and mine, with Deb Dana, all about the nervous system. I hope this episode will help you in learning more about the nervous system and give you practical tools to regulate your autonomic nervous system. I don't want to say more. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. So you write, we are about to take you on a journey of learning how to listen to and speak to the somatic, nonverbal, ancient, wild, beautiful, sometimes scary language of your nervous system. If you can't hear that language, much less speak it, you cannot hope to influence it. So let's start with that. Could you expand on that? What do you mean? How do we listen to and then learn to speak this language, the secret language of our body?
I love this question so much. I think that sentence is it's just so juicy and it's sort of gift wraps this whole idea of the secret language of the body. And when we have something going on in our life, whether it's something in our mind or body that's really affecting us, right? It's affecting our choices, our family, our relationships, our parenting. Um, if we are stuck in a place where we're sort of so absorbed in the physical or mental experience, the physical or mental plane of this experience, we're really missing out on so much information and so much awareness of what's actually happening. So we might think that we're really angry at our partner. We might think that we have a stomach ache because, the chicken sandwich we had for lunch might have been old but then again it happened last week, so who knows, maybe it was something else we ate. So there's all this information about our life, and when we learn the cues that our body sends us through physical sensations, through emotions, through thoughts, through the posture that our body holds, when I don't know, you're listening to someone speak at an event, or you have a friend who's proud of an achievement or something. Their posture is usually open and upright, and their voice is like a presence, and you want to listen. And so, even our posture is speaking, the language of our nervous system. If we're shut down, we're sad, upset, we're not likely going to walk into a room and be open. So, really, what this sentence captures is there's so much information that we can learn to understand that can help us overcome experiences, emotions, behaviors that are keeping us stuck, physical symptoms that we don't understand, that we can learn to overcome in a not so complicated way. And this is where I'm going to pass it on to Kardin.
You crushed it. Next question.
Oh, no, I was going to get into, and then what do we do with that? I didn't want to take the stage for too much time.
No, don't worry about that. You guys have a good dynamic. I've listened to you before, so you know how to juggle. Why don't we begin by going into the AIR approach? What is AIR stands for? And then we'll do some practical stuff.
This is what I passed on to Kardin, so I love that you asked that.
It was interesting when Jen and I decided to commit to the task of the book. It was like, how do you take something insanely complex? And I think it was Einstein who said, make it as simple as possible, but no simpler. And as we sat with that and we reviewed all of the body of work that we know and how we've helped, the thousands of clients we've worked with, this through line appeared. And the through line is what we've encapsulated in this acronym AIR, AIR, which is awareness, interruption, and redesign. It also, by the way, is very much the heart of the neuroscience that underlies almost all forms of habit change. And so number one with awareness, as Jen just so beautifully described, you need to actually know what's happening inside your mind body, inside your nervous system, what it's doing and why it's doing what it's doing, right? You need to, rather than just being like, oh, I get anxious before meetings, right? That's a nice form of awareness, but there's not enough rich data there, right? It's like, what does that really mean in my body? It means I feel this around my heart. I feel this around my breath. When I actually then tune in beyond my body sensations, wow, there really is an emotion of fear. Oh, whoa. What could that be related to? Where did I learn? Where did my body, where did my nervous system learn that speaking in public is something to be afraid of? So this is all part of that awareness sphere. It has many, many layers. And you don't need to know everything, but you need to expand what you know to start making a difference. So that's number one, right? It's also akin to simply what is the first step in solving a problem is acknowledging that you have one, right? That's like also early in kind of 12-step programs. So awareness. And it's also remarkable that when you start practicing awareness, when you start practicing somatic awareness and what's going on inside, you're already beginning all the steps of air, by the way. Like the simple act of tuning in when you've never tuned in your life before is a change. You are doing something different. You're interrupting an old pattern. You're beginning a new process. And usually the body likes it. Then we move on to I, which is interrupt. It's not enough to just be like, I have a problem, right? Well, we have to do some smart, consistent work to interrupt the brain and the body from always going down well-worn neural pathways, well-worn avenues of habit. And it won't do it by itself. In order for change to happen, change needs to happen. And so then we, with awareness throughout the book, we teach all sorts of techniques to expand awareness. And similarly, we teach all sorts of interruption techniques that leverage basically practices from so many fields, from physical therapy, neuro rehab, the latest in the polyvagal science and vagal therapies, NLP techniques. We give you a whole host of how can you interrupt the old patterns, help your mind and body feel safe, and have the capacity to do the most important thing, which is to make new choices, to do something different. And so the interruption technique is what basically interrupts the old and buys you the time, space, regulation, safety, and capacity to then actualize something. Gooder is not a correct form of language, but better, more useful, more appropriate, more honoring of yourself, more in alignment with how you want to treat others, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where we get into the redesign phase, the R of AIR. And there it's about, again, leveraging the rules of neuroplasticity, which is the application of a new action, new habit, new response, new way of being over and over and over and over and over again. And Jenn knows much more. She always remembers these facts about how long it takes for neurons to do their thing and create a new pathway. But that's the last bit. Like, I've become aware of a pattern. I've learned how to interrupt it. And now I'm going to practice and implement the new way I'd like my nervous system to respond over and over again until that becomes what actually fits. That becomes the new natural.
Yeah. So by learning to regulate the nervous system, learning to speak the language of the nervous system can help us in what ways? What are the benefits, Jenn? Why are we even talking about this? Right? What are the benefits of learning to regulate our nervous system? And Kardin mentioned a few things, but I want you to give us like a summary. Why do I need to learn to regulate my nervous system, right?
Jenn, can I go for one more second here? So it was literally just this morning.
Okay.
My daughter.
I love those stories. When people start like that, I'm like, tell me more.
My daughter loves to help me cook breakfast. And if you're a parent, you know that having your child help you cook breakfast is not helping you cook breakfast, right? And so my default response to my child asking me to help me with breakfast is basically irritation. And what I want to say is no, right? And then I'm going to make up a reason because I'm irritated, because I'm a little threatened by it, because I feel like I have the pressure of the morning, because I'm a little groggy and I don't want one more thing to manage. Now, that all is my old neurology. It's the neurology of basically protecting self rather than the neurology or the commitment of supporting and cultivating my child. Because her helping in the kitchen is the way it brings her so much joy. It brings her connection with me. And it also, she's getting good. She's developing her skills. It's impressive what she can do at 6 in the kitchen. And so with this work, I have been able to become aware of the tightness in my chest and the irritation that rises when she asks, right? I'm able to quickly ground into my legs, spread out. These are interruption techniques, spread out the sensation of irritation out of my chest and into the rest of my body. When you spread a sensation beyond the local area that it's getting you, and you spread it into more of your body, it rapidly becomes less intense, less pressurized, and you feel so much more spacious. It's amazing how impatience can diminish when you use an interruption technique like that. And then what's the redesign? The redesign is to orient towards my daughter, to look at her eyes, instead of taking in my irritation, which I've just diminished, to take in her joy. And then prepare breakfast with her. That's air happening in real time so that my daughter has this experience in her body that her joy to connect with me and cook is met by joy rather than you're bothering me.
What if you don't have that capacity or the time in that moment? How would you redesign? This is like a good outcome, right? You did find that you have the time and created this capacity to connect. You were able to join in the joy. But what if you're really tight for time and that kind of stuff? How would you?
Anna, do you know how you get to Carnegie Hall?
No.
Practice. So I'll just be honest, we can provide you with some techniques that you can try to use in a moment of being triggered. But if it's kind of like someone who like once was good at basketball and hasn't played basketball in 15 years and they're stoked to go out on the court on the weekend and they expect their body to be able to do what they want on the court. And then 15 minutes in it, they like sprain their ankle and or like mess up their knee because they want to act differently. They want to act better. They want to play the game well, but they haven't practiced. So similarly, there are things that we definitely have techniques in your pocket for the moment, but being able to fundamentally change the way you respond to parenting is something that requires kind of daily practice and embodiment work so that your nervous system is learning new tricks.
What you did there, you did the air approach. And your answer was yes to your daughter's request to prepare breakfast. What I'm trying to say is sometimes you can do the air approach, not, spread the sensation, diminish your triggers or not be reactive. And you can say no to your kid. The answer not always going to be yes. That's what I'm trying to get. But how you deliver the yes or the no, that's what I'm trying to get.
Well, that's a good question too.
What's important here is you modulating your response, taming your reactivity, becoming more patient, spreading your sensation, practicing your air technique. But the outcome doesn't have to be always yes, right, to your kid. It can be no, but how that's delivered, that's what I'm trying to get to.
100%. And I'll simply say that the capacity to deliver a no while maintaining connection and staying with your child long enough so that they can absorb the disappointment without rupture or condemnation or whatever. And for you as a parent to be able to hold that space long enough so that you don't cave and be like, okay, right? That's connected, skillful boundary work with yourself and your child.
Anna, that reminds me, as a mom, I feel like I'm in a transition myself with how I respond to my son. In the first almost 2 years of Leo's life, my intuition, like how I went into how I wanted to, how I envisioned myself, holding boundaries or being soft and open was very different to the experience that I actually had. When I became a mom, I found that actually my intuition was to really let Leo play and be messy, like way more than, even in a rest, or it's almost like I didn't care about society, what other people thought, it was like in that moment, my compass as a mom was like, this is what he needs right now. And I was like, wow, am I going to be like this? Like, as he grows older, 2, 3, 4, the boundary, the safety is going to start to settle in at some point. And that's the place that I'm at now, where I feel Leo is, now he's starting to push his own boundaries of like, is this safe? Am I angry? Am I upset? He's never had a full-on tantrum yet, but he cries like any child does, which is healthy. But now I'm finding that safe space in my body to communicate. I see that you want to step up on the chair and then step up on the table. But right now, that's not possible. And that's actually quite unsafe because if you fall, you can hurt yourself. And sort of leaning into that in my body has felt really good. But like a few months ago, it was more about letting him explore and then me just being close to him rather than giving him, that just feeling intuitively what he needed as he's growing. And I can really see his nervous system responding to, speaking of connection and yes and no, he's giving me cues of, but why? I really want to go on the table right now. Why are you telling me this? But then, like the second and the third time, he's like, oh, no, no. If I go on here, it may be bang, bang on the floor. So, and I'm like, yeah. And then he has a sense of like pride and like, oh, I know what happens, if I step on top of the dinner table, I might fall down. And I thought that's a really nice also way to sort of touch on your question as well, like why it's important to know how to regulate. It's also like a way to tap into your intuition and what you feel you need. A lot of us, like, we people please or we do what we think other people want us to do with our kids. Or I don't know, I see it a lot like, oh, I wish I wouldn't do that, but my mother-in-law is here and like, I know she really wants me to do that thing. Or I don't know, things like that. Or like, when you're in public. But when you learn to feel safe in your body and have that full embodied yes or no experience, yeah, it's so powerful and so on and so forth. But regulating the nervous system and learning what that means, it's not just relational and behavioral, and it's also like your health. Like when Anna, when you're pushing yourself too hard, and if you're unaware that you're doing that, it's so easy to just fall into burnout and not know really why. Like, oh, I'm just at the beginning, it might feel like you're sick or you're frustrated, you're angry or you're anxious or you don't like anything related to work or you avoid talking about it with your family at home. And then when you're aware, the first signs, actually, I'm just pushing myself too hard and my body is telling me that I need to set some boundaries. I need to rest a little bit more. Maybe I don't look at my phone after 5 p.m. and then the body responds back in the language of the nervous system with a different, speaking of change and redesign, different and new pathways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's health benefits, there are relational benefits, right? And then parenting benefits for sure. And Jenn, we have already talked about your health journey and your story in the first episode that we did. But Kardin, I want to give you a chance to share a little bit about your story. What brought you to this work?
I actually just burst out of the ground fully formed, just like this. Just like a couple years ago, I had no development. I just appeared on the earth. I'm happy to answer that. I just wanted to back up for one little second and say you were talking about all the benefits. I wanted to say the other benefit, perhaps the most important benefit, is how effective it is. I think that one of the biggest guilts that parents live with is the wish to parent differently, the wish to react differently or to respond instead of react, the wish that they could have been more present rather than more less angry as a parent. So there's all this wish, want, talk. And the absolute truth is that when the body is activated, the mind stands almost no chance to changing its behavior with even something as strong as desire or like an authentic, sincere wish to be different. I really just want it to land that if you want to parent differently, if you want to savor the time with your children differently, if you want to inhabit ease, joy, and connection, not 100% of the time, that will never happen. But if you want it to happen a lot more, the only way that will happen is through supporting your body into that process on that sensational, behavioral, and emotional level. And you need to speak sensational behavior and emotional forms of communication, which are not verbal. They're the ones we're talking about. So that's the last thing I really wanted to leave people with here. Like, if you want that guilt to diminish, if you want your wishes to turn into like actualized different experience of being a parent, this is the work that makes that happen. So, and speaking of that, my journey into becoming a somatic experiencing practitioner, which is the substantial form of the trauma work that I do with people, of writing this book with Jenn on how to regulate the nervous system and all our courses, it basically spawned, I stumbled into it through agonizing chronic low back pain that was more or less unresponsive to more than a decade's worth of other kind of work to get it better. So I've been a body worker for, it'll be 18 years this January. I've been a body worker and I loved it to pieces. I was a damn good one. I was really effective at helping get a lot of other people out of pain, but both with my clients and myself, they were the clients that would not improve pain wise, no matter how much we optimized their muscles, their alignment, their fascia, their tissue. And that included me. You know, from Pilates, I had the best powerhouse you could encounter, right? From gyrotonics, I could do all sorts of wonderful things with my joints, from body work and functional movement. Like, I was never like Jenn, who's a remarkable ballerina, but I was like a pretty decent specimen, y'all. And despite that, my pain only got worse year after year after year rather than better. And I think that I do have guardians or spirits that help me along. And I randomly encountered a book by John Sarno called Healing Back Pain, which you're nodding your head at, you're familiar with. And it was the first time I'd ever read that pain could be associated essentially with psychology, personality type, emotional repression. And his description of let's just say the client type mapped onto me so remarkably well that I was like, whoa, this makes far more sense than all these orthopedic, kinesiologic explanations for my pain. Besides it making sense, it worked. Within a week, I had the best improvement in my horrible pain that I'd had in 10 years, like an 80% improvement, which, by the way, is wild as a result from reading a book. But I don't know if you guys know this, your brain and head are very firmly connected to your body through your neck and your central nervous system and your spine. And so to say that, they're completely interrelated. And to make a really long story short, that began my journey into the brain, emotions, somatics, and how the nervous system is really, the brain is the only organ in the entire body responsible for generating pain. You can't experience pain without a brain or a nervous system. And that's at the heart of almost all pain conditions and a whole galaxy of syndromes, itises, etc., that people suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome to fibromyalgia to interstitial cystitis to migraines. And the work revolutionized my life, and it's the work that we bring into the world now. And again, what's really wonderful about it is that, yeah, I got into it because I was in terrible pain, but that's like the baseline benefit, right? That being out of pain does not compare to being able to inhabit joy and connection with my children, which is a parallel result to doing the work because it's all completely interconnected.
So, Jenn, how do we know in what kind of nervous system state we're in? Right? We always hear the body keeps the score, you have unresolved stored trauma in your body, all of those things. How do I know in what kind of state am I? And how does one know if this is old stuff or new stuff? Like, where is that line, right? Where is that stored stuckness stuff? Where is the new nervous system dysregulation stuff? I don't know if I'm asking this well, but
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I understood. Yes, yeah, no, that's so important. I feel like you got to like the X marks the spot for people so they can be like, oh, now I understand, where to start. There are physical signs, there are mind signs, self-talk, there are relational signs, that in your life you cut out your friends after an argument. You do it again and again and again. And with your body, you have constant chronic symptoms that you can't seem to resolve. Or, things like my personality, I'm just moody. I don't like people. Or so there's all these kinds of signs that are physical, behavioral, mental. But for the person, to become more aware of whether they're, am I on track with, as Kardin said, there's no such thing as like being regulated all the time. It's more about how we come out of a state of dysregulation or stress. That sort of defines how well balanced your system is. So when we're able to have an argument, experience grief, get sick, like, COVID, and then come out of it. So your immune system is working well. Your sort of relationships and everything in your life is not defined by, your stuckness, let's say. So with tuning into the body, in the book, we share something called BASE, and it's a really nice awareness tool. So as we said at the beginning, you can't create change. You can't know what needs to change until you're aware of the states in your body that are unhelpful. So when we tune into BASE, BASE is an acronym for breath, action, like the actions that your body wants to take, sensation, and emotion. So when we tune into that right now, so Anna, may I guide you through BASE?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you have something that you can lean on, lean back into behind you, or is your seat comfortable? Are you comfortable? Yeah, great. Are your feet on the ground or?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. So I'm just going to ask you for a moment if you feel comfortable with that to just close your eyes and settle into your body. And before we start, just take the deepest breath you've taken all morning. And then as you've taken that breath, you might have noticed that your body is just a little bit more settled into the surface beneath you. So now, Anna, we're just going to place your attention on your breath, on your chest area. What do you notice? Is your breathing shallow? Is it slow? Is it deep? Is it quick? Were you holding your breath when I asked you? So just noticing.
No, it's rhythmic. It's not shallow. It's not super deep. It's like slight agitation.
Interesting. So that's the one little thing that, gives us information. So before we go into action, how do you know, Anna, that there's a slight agitation? What physical sensations or thoughts came to you as you shared that? And you're like, yeah, I know that that's a bit of agitation.
It's not thoughts per se. It's just body sensations mostly. It's this up and down going through the body, sort of like electrical wave type of thing. It's too fast and too abrupt, or it's not as smooth or relaxed. That's how I can describe it.
I love that. So right now in this moment, just sticking with your breath for one more moment, you mentioned that it's not smooth or, waving in a way that like, so that's information. We're not going to try and change your breath. So let's go into action now. So still settling into the experience of your body, Anna, right now, what posture, action, movement does your body want to take if you allow it to? Does it want to, just like your shoulders collapse, or do you want to go and lie in bed, or do you want to actually adjust your posture and open your shoulders and your heart center? Or are you not wanting to take an action and you're happy in the stillness that you're in? What are you experiencing with the action communication of your body?
Yeah, no, the action is not to, there is some electrical energy, right? Some activation, obviously, because I'm conducting the interview, but it's not too overwhelming that I have to run away or do something else. So what I normally do is I put my leg like this on the chair to sort of, it's like kind of a grounding technique, I guess, more feeling your body or changing the posture. Like occasionally I would do that. One leg and then I switch to the next leg and I hold on to my ankle like this while I'm doing the interview. I think that's the urge.
I love that. And that's like an urge that is telling you like that you can count on yourself. Like, and like in this moment, I'm feeling the urge to shift because there's a tiny bit of sensation or sense of unsafe, but actually I know I can count on myself to find the safety. That's so beautiful. So that's information about your actions that your body wants to take right now. Then we have sensation. So tuning into your whole body. What part of your body calls your attention first? You might have already mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but what happens now as I ask you, what sensations are you experiencing?
A little bit of that, like in the chest area, I would say more in this general, not tightness, but a little like not at rest or at peace, like Zen-like. It's a little tight and a little
Mhm.
activated.
Yeah, aware, like we're at an interview right now. So we're switched on. I'm here to make sure everything goes well.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's super important information about, what the sensations, what your nervous system is communicating through your muscles, through your heart. And then finally, if you are able to tap into the ocean of emotions that we experience as humans right now, what's present for you in your body and where?
Don't know any particular emotion is present at the moment. I'm gonna say curiosity. It's
May
just maybe
I?
like around like I feel
Mhm.
like in the back of my head.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have any particular big
Yeah.
emotion right now.
Yeah. And maybe tuning into that electrical wave and that agitation, maybe there's a hint of something there. But overall, what you're sharing is that, your experience is that there's this like container that you're in and you're holding one, but you're also holding one for yourself. If something goes off balance, you have a way that your body responds. And so we've tuned into your base of the experience of your nervous system right now. And so that information helps you understand, well, now that you know all this, Anna, and I'm sure that because of your work, you were already aware of this experience, but if you weren't, what would you know now that you didn't know earlier about your experience? Like how regulated or dysregulated are you?
I'm pretty regulated at the moment, I would say. It's very, very mild dysregulation, right? If it was on a scale of 1 to 10, I would be like maybe 5 and below range.
Yeah. And so basically, for anyone listening, and you were really like, so how do I know if I'm regulated or dysregulated, if this is helpful or unhelpful? Base is a really nice place to start. And we recommend, it's really helpful to do it in the morning because in the morning, there's a lot of residual stuff from the day before, from, unresolved experiences that are sort of keeping the score in the body, which I want to touch on after I close this little part of the conversation. So in the morning, start with base. And then, as you know, in the awareness step, we're not trying to fix or change yet. Like the soul tuning into the awareness of your body often helps bring down a state of hypervigilance or a state of, because you're actually listening and your body's like, oh, yeah, I was trying to tell you that I was a little bit nervous and now we're aware. And so I feel safer already. So with regards to whether it's from the past or whether it, you were saying a present dysregulation. Kardin and I had an interview with someone, is it 3 months ago now? And right in this moment, his name is escaping me, and I'll ask Kardin in a moment to remind me. But he said something really cool, that is especially around like our emotions and reactions, and that actually sort of then mirrors the, if you get physical symptoms thereafter. But He said, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if something is happening right now, yeah, I remembered the phrase. I couldn't remember his name. Yeah, Brian. So if something is happening in right now, and, you know, a response would be, mild annoyance, and our response is like rage and violence, and it happens time and time and time again, and we happen to have anger issues, or if a response to some feedback or critique would be a little bit of, like sadness or frustration, but then you're okay. And a big reaction would be, really shutting down. And so in those cases, we know that our body is really mirroring an experience that we've already had that usually starts in childhood when a need was either not met how we needed it to be met, and it happened time and time and time and time again. And so our body is so brilliant that it adapted with these ways to help us cope. And the same thing I just want to talk about, because that's our work too, the physical symptoms. When something again happens, like let's say you have a car accident, and after the car accident, you are stuck with maybe neck pain. And for the following 6 months, maybe you have, you get whiplash really easily, you're really sensitive around the neck area. And then like it heals and you're okay. But then a couple years later, the pain comes back and you're like, oh, I wonder what I did this morning or yesterday. And then you're like, oh, I wonder what. And so it's really about the chronic experience of symptoms in the body that get worse, usually around like emotional inflammation. So when we're really triggered, when we are dysregulated, our physical symptoms get worse too. And the chronicity usually indicates that the root is in your nervous system, and it's rooted in patterns coming from our childhood. And the reason why it ends up with a chronic illness or a big sort of coping pattern that keeps us stuck is because it creates this chronic experience of stress in our body. So if you're a people pleaser, or you have, repressed anger, so on and so forth, the experience in your body is stress day in and day out. And so your physiology will respond with stress physiology. And the state of our physiology is always the sort of a mirror and really the effect of the state in our nervous system. So if our nervous system is grounded, we go up and we go down and we come back to a place of homeostasis. Then our physiology, our immune system, our cardiovascular system, all the systems in our body will also be in homeostasis and strong and regulated. Yeah.
So basically, if we learn to regulate our nervous system on a daily basis and make that a habit and a practice, we will develop this flexibility in our nervous system, right? The aim is not to always be zen and calm, because stressors come and go. What we're trying to do is to manage that stress better, to know when we are activated, what we need to do, and when we are in disassociation or that kind of state, how can we come out of that? So we develop this flexibility by recognizing in what kind of nervous system state we are and learning techniques to help us move through various states. Developing this flexibility is key in rewiring the old brain patterns. Is this what it boils down to?
It definitely does boil down to that. I know that you've had Peter on the show before, Peter Levine, founder of Somatic Experiencing, and he famously coined the term pendulation. But what he coined that for were his observations, basically a phenomenon of all living things, which is contraction and expansion, up, down, rupture, repair, love, rage, fight, collapse, right? Joy, depression, growth, death. So the only fixed thing in all of the phenomenon of nature is that it's not fixed. And basically all systems become sick when they become fixed, when they become rigid, when they lose the flow that you just really beautifully described. So that is the goal. The goal is to restore, adapt. There's not just adaptiveness. I also use this term that called elasticity, right? And elasticity implies that there is sort of this baseline. And this baseline would be a level of calm awareness, connection, engagement in the world, feeling of your body. You're not overly mental. You're not overly in your feelings, right? You're not isolated, but you're not completely glomming onto people. There's this baseline where all it's defined as, I define it simply as feeling okay and comfortable within the parameters of your own skin, your own mind and body. And then to then have the adaptability to then go above baseline, to deal with deadlines at work, to deal with a crisis with your child, to do whatever, right? To work out. That's going above, in a sense, to above baseline. Doesn't mean you're outside your window of tolerance or dysregulated, just up. And then the ability to come down, to be able to disengage from your phone, to be able to rest, to be able to sleep, to be able to go into a period of useless grief for a period of time. And then the elasticity to come back to the baseline. And again, we're never steady, but it is this adaptability and elasticity. And that concept can be mapped onto everything from symptoms to your relationship with your child to me and Jenn's relationship, right? Jenn and I annoy one another. We trigger one another. We do things that cause us to feel wounded and we want to withdraw or attack or go cold, right? And by the way, there are parts of me that wish that never happened. I don't like feeling bad. I don't like feeling bad. I don't like feeling angry. I don't like feeling hurt. I don't like feeling vindictive. I don't like wasting time in my mind thinking about why someone is wrong and owes me something. Okay. But it's a fact of life that the flow, and that's part of the flow. And so, but nervous system health, nervous system resilience, nervous system regulation, and really the health of your entire life is that that's going to happen. And then you want to have the elasticity to come out of it and then get back on with your life and then engage in something that's peak joyful. Like what, like also how many people here have had like that great streak with their husbands or their wives or their partners, whoever, for like a couple of days. And you're like, oh, we're in such a good place. I'm feeling so much love. We've had good sex. We've had fun. We've been parenting well together. And then like, it's the sixth day and just some shit happens and you're in that fight again. You're like, oh. The illusion is that that's the only part of that that's an illusion is that that's not supposed to happen. Of course it's going to happen. That's the elasticity with which we come back.
Well, I'm wondering if you would be willing to share some practices, maybe personal practices that you both have. What is in your toolkit these days, right? How do you find that elasticity, to use your language? Maybe I'll start with Jenn. What are some things that you do on a daily basis, or when you find that Kardin is annoying you or triggering you? What are the things that you do? And is there a difference, Jenn, in your nervous system? Like, do you recognize where were you before in terms of your nervous system and now? What's different? How would you describe that difference, right?
So I'm currently in a place where I have that much sort of capacity, like my physical body is really healthy. I'd shared my story. I'm in a place right now where all of my tools and focus go on my emotions and my, core wounds. And for me, I love the idea that nothing is impossible with how much someone can grow and heal and change. And I see nothing wrong in people changing, and people growing and people transforming and finding their new skin, their new boundaries, their new. So my current sort of one of my biggest tools right now is recognizing when I'm in sort of an emotionally inflamed experience, meaning I'm like highly triggered. And then knowing, so I'm just going to back up a second. So the emotion is very important. And it's very important to me because emotion, ended up being the root of my chronic illness. Whether you want to call emotion stress or trauma, it was rooted in the experience of emotions, big emotions that were unresolved, big emotions that were repeating themselves without me necessarily being aware of how much they were stressing me out. And so emotions right now and how I relate to people, how, the energy that I choose to walk into a room with, and how I perceive, my own triggers. Like now we're visiting my husband's family, and it's a Greek family, and Greek families have like no boundaries and no personal space. And we've been here for over a month now. And I grew up an only child with just my mom, and I literally like spent hours by myself, and I love being by myself. So for me, having a lot of different personalities, emotions, opinions around me all the time, while I have, with Leo, I'm very like protective of like my gentle parenting style. I'm very protective of like, okay, now it needs to sleep now. Like I know we're to Taverna right now, and it's like 11 p.m. and Greeks don't sleep, but I need to go home now. And so, all these experiences that are somewhat minor, but there are instances where someone will say something or my husband will respond in a way, and then, that I'm not loved here, or I'm not enough wound comes up. Or so for me, it's managing those. And so my favorite, I wouldn't even call it like I want to stay practical, but it's more of like this repetitive sort of exercise of I'm aware this is happening and I need to take a moment to step away. So in the past, I would have probably gone into like, just a reactive, let's say with my husband, and, want him to understand how I'm feeling and like what he did to me. And like, and, it wasn't really the core issue anyway. It was, he responded in a way and I responded in another. But now I know it's not his fault. I don't want to blame. I don't want him to blame, or whatever the experience or the argument is, as Kardin was saying earlier. But just recognizing the feeling in my body, recognizing, is it anger? Is it hurt? Do I want to cry? Do I want to scream? Because although hurt for my body, hurt is beneath the anger, and like anger is the reaction. But the ones that come up most for me are anger and like hurt, like pain, like the pain and the anger are rooted in my mommy issues, and the hurt and the physical pain I feel in my chest is my daddy issues. So those two kind of come up and alternate. But when I feel that, the repeated practice of being aware of it and then stepping away from the situation so I can like almost like I'm a highly other people's energies, other people's emotions because of my childhood and also because of who I am, just my essence really impact me. So if everyone around me is in a bad mood, I'm going to be like, oh my God, this is a really difficult day. Whereas my husband, he wouldn't care. He'd be like, yeah, everyone wants to go to the beach. And people are like, read the room. Like, no. So stepping away, being aware of what's happening, stepping away, and then speaking with my inner child and being like, okay, I know what's happening. It actually happened an instance really briefly this morning, and I heard the voice so clearly, and it was like, she doesn't love me. And it was actually my mother-in-law. And it has not like there's nothing I love my mother-in-law and I know she loves me. And it wasn't about my, it was historical, right? So it wasn't about that. But there was an instance, an action that she took, some words that she said where my, just a little flare up. And I was like, oh, she doesn't love me, which means that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough for anyone ever. And now I need to go and be alone and hide. So I recognize that. So recognizing the wound, the more aware you are of its origin, it doesn't always have to be like the exact day and moment, but the general origin is so helpful. And in time, you can really work with that wound in many ways. But my favorite way is to speak to myself, to my 7-year-old self, just for a few moments, hear what she's feeling and recognize that now, I know this is said over and over, and now with social media, there are some things that are just so cliche, but now is not then. And it's just so powerful. And that kind of, for me, that repeated practice has become an anchor of space between, reacting and inner tantrum, which, wants to come out, and coming back to a place of like more capacity, regulation. And yeah, I've had to do that a lot in the last year with my relationship with Kardin. We were under a lot of pressure with writing a book, redoing our program, and it was a really tough year emotionally. And so the tools that I use now are, although they're rooted in emotions, Anna, they help my body. So if I resolve this, my body is not under stress for the rest of the day. Whereas if it was, and I didn't resolve, and I kept feeling I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, and then maybe I get angry, I get hurt, and then I project the anger onto my partner or Kardin or whatever, then I would feel stress. And then after 2 or 3 days of stress, I might start to feel tired, because that's my pattern, like the fatigue sets in. And so that's kind of my most strong and like life-changing, like the one thing that post chronic illness healing has like completely changed my, like what's possible with your emotions, what's possible with your relationships, even when you think, it's not going to work with this person, whether it's a friend but then, if you're willing to grow and, if it's a two-way partnership like Kardin and I, if we're both willing to grow, which I think I can speak for you, Kardin, that we are, right? Then a lot of important things happen, not just for yourself, but also my work with Kardin this year has also helped me grow in my relationship with my husband and helped him grow, because then he's seen my responses have been really different, and then he's been, so it sort of moves outward. So that's like that kind of tool. If you want another one that's a little bit more body based, I can give one as well, but that has been life-changing.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It is very, very helpful. Yeah. How about you, Kardin? What are you working on? What is your go-to tool or method or practice?
There's so few dads that listen to these podcasts, unfortunately, around parenting. But the practice I'm about to describe, I think, works for any gender, anyone along the spectrum. But also, this is like, I think, a really good practice for fathers. There's the famous quote, which is, we don't rise to our expectations or our aspirations. We fall to our lowest level of preparation. And so for me, what's really come back on board really is a matter of like life or death, and really life being something wonderful or it not. And that might as well just be death. And so I have a morning practice that I do before anyone else in the house wakes up. And the goal of that practice, I basically do 10 or 15 minutes of sun salutations and stuff just to wake up my body. I do 5 minutes of a little bit of qigong and self-meridian work, but that's very preparatory, but it's important prep. Just, it's interesting. This is why Jenn and I are such a good partnership, in a sense of the opposite way we're going to come at this. I'm doing almost no self-talk right now. And when you look at the structures of the brain, that's hierarchy, right? We've got brainstem, we've got limbic system, we've got neocortex. And that developmentally, the function of each newer part of the brain, each more sophisticated part of the brain, is predicated on the balance and regulation of its predecessor, right? So you can't really have ideal emotional regulation, by the way, if you don't have actually proper sensory motor regulation. Pre-emotional, right? Just like if your body doesn't know how to move itself or coordinate its movements, then it's going to compromise the next level up, which is emotion. And then, of course, up the chain to cognition. And that's why folks who do neuro rehab or even emotional work find that doing sensory motor rehab on people improves emotional function. We talk about that. So, with that sort of being said, what I spend most of my morning practice doing once I've done that kind of body nurturance is I sit in an embodied practice where I cultivate that state of okayness and comfort in the body that I mentioned earlier. And it's a state that for me has a couple of very important qualities to it. I tune into the grounded aspects of my body. Then I tune into the empowered aspects of my body. Those are different things. One is a connection to the earth and a sense of immobility and rootedness. The other is a sense of your own agency that ranges from your energetic feeling of your power, the power of your voice, the power of your muscles. It's this idea that I have agency and I can apply force and will in the world, and that feels good. And then above that, I work on my heart, which is to occupy a state of open-heartedness. And I think about my daughters or my wife, the people I love, and I intentionally cultivate a state there that feels the element of connection, which is the opposite of the state that my heart's been in most of my life, which is closed and protected. And then finally, I go upstairs to my mind, where I want to experience just clarity and calmness. I'm going into some detail here. So my goal is to slide into that for almost 10 minutes because it's something that my body hasn't known for most of my life. And this is that baseline I was talking about, that home base where the flow of life elastically returns to when I become challenged, whether I get challenged in a way of becoming angry and getting sympathetically activated, or if I fall into that shame collapse cycle. So I spend 10 minutes there, and then I use direct practices from our HEAL program, the work that Jenn and I do. One is called pendulation with future selfing. I'll mention that. And then I'm also using a technique that I've learned from G.S. Youngblood called provocative meditation. So now that I'm in my baseline, I then deliberately bring to mind trigger the current situations that have been triggering me emotionally. Because like Jenn, I'm also doing primarily emotional and relational work right now. And I swing my attention there and deliberately provoke a response in my body so that I can expose myself to the fire or the ice of that trigger, of that historical wound, of the default pattern of the way I want to respond based on my previous coping mechanisms. And this is, again, the G.S. Youngblood thing. This is an element that I got from him. I not only feel the top level emotion, which in this case often is the anger, but I stay there long enough to feel the wound, the vulnerable hurt that's underneath it. And I stay there long enough in the extraordinary discomfort of that feeling until it basically softens and loosens its coping survival grip on my body. This was an embodied experience that my child self had no capacity to hold, but this fabulous almost 40 adult male can. And then elasticity, after I've just allowed myself to get comfortable inside the uncomfortable sensation, I pendulate back to that home base I described. And I go back and forth. And I go back and forth until I can hold the triggering moment inside the home base state. And I'm not hijacked by the anger. I'm not hijacked by defending against the wound. And my mind can finally decide, and my heart can decide how I want to respond or relate to the situation or person that just happened. Because if I can get everything below my mind regulated, rooted, then my mind and my heart usually spontaneously find a connected, respectful, loving, and when need to be also boundaried way to speak or respond to the situation. And then when I get triggered in real time, what I have to do is anchor back into the home base state, find that elasticity. And that's been my practice for the past couple months.
Pretty powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Obviously, it takes time to develop that sense of home base, right? Not everybody can. What I'm hearing, I think, from both of you is it's so fascinating how you two have different ways of practicing. But I think Jen said now she can go into the core wound work. Now, I think she didn't say this explicitly, but I'm hearing you both are saying the same thing. So you basically developed that home base so that you can do the core wound work.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And then to experience the core wound in the now body, not the then body. And the now body is couldn't be more different than the then body. But the nervous system doesn't know that until you support it either through self-therapy work or through therapy work with another to experience the now body, to experience the then pain in the now body long enough so that your brain and nervous system can be like, oh, this, and it's true, guys, it sucks. It feels terrible. And it's okay and not dangerous now. And I think that anyone can do what Jen and I just described for sure. But you're right. There might be a lot of work to do before someone can find home base. There might be a lot of pain and suffering and more superficial, and also not, I don't say it's superficial, but like broad levels of dysregulation that need containment and support before we titrate down into the real roots. And also in our program, that's how Jen and I lead people over the 10 modules. We don't start in the heart of the fire. We give this graded approach that builds regulation and capacity. Often in the beginning, very much, it's always embodied, but from the top down in the beginning to give people the ability and the safety to go ever deeper.
So I want to really thank both of you for being here today, for writing the book, which is super practical. I really enjoyed diving into it. And I really enjoyed listening to the two of your practices and the growth that you have done. It's really inspiring.
Thank you, Anna. That feels good.
Thank you very much, Anna. So lovely to be back with you.